What's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the latest going on with the Edmonton Oilers. And are the Oilers potentially in jeopardy of waiting another season of Connor McDavid? And we're going to go over that today. So, the Edmonton Oilers are on the verge of potentially missing the playoffs here in 2023. And listen, the clock is ticking. Every year that the Oilers miss the playoffs, there's always that suspicion about what could McDavid be. Could he be looking around the league saying, I would like to go there, or I'd like to go here. At the end of the day, he doesn't have the control, so it doesn't really matter. But just for the Oilers' sake, if nothing else, they're wasting the prime years of... Listen, as an Islander fan, I can say very happily, I'm glad we see him twice a year. He kicks our butts, and we don't see him again until next year. Most teams around the league can't say that. And I think that is something that is just such a credit to how talented, and not even just like his skill, like his hockey IQ. Some of the goals he scores are just weird goals off of the back of a defenseman's skate, or just reading the play before it happens. And that's what Wayne Gretzky was always good at. He knew the play before it developed. And that is Connor McDavid, but to the next level here in 2023. But that's enough about McDavid. They need more pieces around him. Now, the good news is we're hearing some stuff here about Evander Kane, and potentially, by the time this video is actually posted, Evander Kane might be back in the lineup for the Oilers, which is obviously great news. Some scoring depth adds a little bit of grit and size to that forward group, something that the Oilers could use here down the stretch as they look to fight their way back into the playoffs. And pun intended there with a guy like Evander Kane, who is not afraid to drop the gloves. But what are the biggest needs for the Oilers going into the deadline? Well, there's been a couple of interesting names thrown around the Oilers organization, and we're going to go over those guys. So the first thing I want to talk about is a video I made earlier this year talking about, the stability of goaltending, right? Stuart Skinner has looked very good recently. Jack Campbell has looked a little bit better. What do they need to do, right, with the goaltending? Do they need to get somebody? At this point, they don't really have a choice. You kind of have what you have, and kind of have to just go with it, And I think that's kind of where things are at for the Oilers, and hope that Stuart Skinner can keep things going, or Jack Campbell can kind of go back to the goalie he was in Toronto. But I think the bigger point is defense, and the Leafs. Keep saying the Leafs. How many times do I have to say Leafs here? Drink every time I say Leafs in this video. Their lack of defense in Edmonton is the concern. And this is a team that, Darnell Nurse not playing well, not playing up to his new salary he just got, and that's kind of not a great thing, but that's for another day. Same thing even for guys like Tyson Barrie, some of the younger guys, whether they're hurt or just still trying to get their feet wet in the league and still kind of treading the mud and the waters of a first or second year NHL defenseman at a very young age. Guys like Broberg, Bouchard, Samorukov, some fairly young defensemen on this team. So you need some stability there. And there's been rumors that Erik Karlsson's name has been thrown around. Apparently those rumors are no longer there. But they seem to be looking at a lot of other defensemen. Guys like Vladislav Gavrikov in Columbus has been one that's really been tied to the Oilers here recently. I almost said the Leafs again, and I just said it again. Vladislav Gavrikov is one. Matthias Ekholm recently of the Nashville Predators, and going along the lines there in Nashville, maybe if things don't work out with Ekholm, do they consider a guy like Ryan McDonough, two-time Stanley Cup champion, no big deal with the Tampa Bay Lightning, captain of the New York Rangers before that. He's got a pretty good pedigree and would definitely fit in well in the Oilers locker room. So that's one I look at. I think there's a couple of guys available that if the Oilers see themselves as a playoff team, I think there's something there. And I think this is a team that just needs a guy that can be that number one shutdown defenseman. And those are guys that aren't just for the picking. They're not guys that are just readily available. And the problem is teams that are willing to give those guys up want you to give back Philip Broberg or Evan Bouchard. And that's, I think, the bigger issue here, because apparently Jacob Chychrun has been on the radar for the Oilers. But don't expect that anytime soon, because the problem is they're saying, we want Philip Broberg in return. And the Oilers are saying, nah, that's not happening. no thanks. And that's kind of the end of the discussion. And I think that a lot of teams, like Nashville looking for Ekholm and McDonough, they maybe get a little bit less than a Chychrun deal, right? So maybe you get away without having to trade Broberg or Bouchard, because ideally you're adding to your blue line. You don't want to be taking that away. Now, the other factor is, too, I don't know necessarily how they're going to deal with this Oscar Klefbom money situation. I think his money is just dead cap, and that's just money paid out by the owners. But that's something, if they could find a way to get rid of that money, that could help them in getting a McDonough or Ekholm deal done. But you guys can let me know down below the extent of that, because I do not necessarily know that. But that's what the Oilers have to be looking at. It's kind of like the Leafs, right? Like I said in my most recent video, make sure if you haven't checked that out. The Leafs need to add a big name defenseman similar to the Oilers. So there are teams in the market here. So if you're willing to give up the assets, it's kind of a seller's market here, in the sense that the teams that are going to sell at the deadline, and if you have good assets like an Ekholm or a McDonough, Gavrikov might go for a first-round pick at this year's deadline. As crazy as that sounds, but this seems like a market that those teams can do quite well in. If you have the assets, you will get a good return for them. And unfortunately for teams like the Oilers or the Leafs, you're going to have to pay a premium for those guys in order to acquire them. I think the Oilers are in a spot, kind of like the Leafs, where you're in a cup window right now. And you have McDavid and Draisaitl in the prime of their careers and just playing the level that they're at. And you don't want to look in 10 years from now and say, yeah, those Oilers teams are so good with McDavid and Draisaitl, but they can never get that defense or goaltending together, and they never ended up getting anywhere. And that is really, I think, the worst case scenario here for the Oilers, and something that I think they look to avoid. And if they want to do that, they're going to have to go out there and get the big name defenseman. Like I said, I think all of those guys are really good options. I really like the idea of Mattias Ekholm being a fit there, because I really think McDonough's going to have a lot of suitors just because of his name and the notoriety he has. Yeah, Ekholm's a big defenseman as well, but McDonough has, I think he's from St. Paul, Minnesota, so right there, the Minnesota Wild are going to be a huge favorite to potentially land him if he is really available. The Leafs really have been tied to him even last summer when he was potentially moving out and inevitably got traded to Nashville. Columbus was in the mix at that time. Those are the same kind of teams that'll be in the mix this year. So let me know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think of the Oilers? Which players would you like to see the Oilers add at this year's trade deadline? I might even do a mock trades video for the Oilers. If you guys leave some mock trades down below or some suggestions for guys that the Oilers should maybe pursue at this year's NHL trade deadline. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and let's go Oilers.